So today I am going to read the Che Guevara's book Motorcycle Diaries. He wrote that book when uh, he was traveling throughout the South America. Started from a bike cycle with a friend, and then on foot or whatever means he got access to. So I will read the preface of the book first. Once again. Yeah, so I want to read the preface of the book first, which was written by Alida Guerra March on July 2003. This is the this is the preface of this version of the book. So so she wrote that when I read these notes for the first time, they were not yet in book form, and I did not know the person who had written them. I was much younger than I identified immediately with this man who had narrated his adventures in such a spontaneous way. Of course, as I continued reading, I began to see more clearly who this person was, and I was very glad to be his daughter. So she is daughter of Che Guevara. It is not my aim to tell you anything of what you will discover as you read, but I do not doubt that when you have finished the book, you will want to go back to enjoy some passages again, either for the beauty they describe or the intensity of the feelings they convey. There were moments when I literally took over Granado's place on the motorbike and clung to my dad's back, journeying with him over the mountains and around the lakes. I admit there were some occasions when I left him to himself, especially at those times when he writes so graphically things I would never talk about myself. When he does, however, he reveals yet again just how honest and unconventional he could be. To tell you the truth, I should say that the more I read, the more in love I was with the boy my father had been. I do not know if you will share these sentiments with me, but while I was reading, I got to know the young Ernesto better. The Ernesto who left Argentina with his yearnings for adventure and his dreams of the great deeds he would perform. And the young man who, as he discovered the reality of our continent, continued to mature as a human being and to develop as a social being. Slowly, we see how beautiful is that. I am not reading, I am just telling my feelings that how beautiful it is. Uh, as a daughter, you have seen a version of a man, and then you got to know that how that person was when he was young. You look at a different person. How fascinating. Slowly, you till now you are seeing your father as a father, but now you are seeing him as a man, as an individual. There is not the relationship of father and daughter. It is a relationship of a reader who is reading about a person who loves to adventure, and in his adventure you are seeing yourself roaming around a continent. Beautiful. So she writes, slowly we see how his dreams and ambitions changed. He grew increasingly aware of the pain of many others, and he allowed it to become a part of himself. The young man who makes us smile at the beginning with his absurdities and craziness becomes before our eyes increasingly sensitive as he tells us about the complex indigenous worlds of Latin America and poverty of its people and the exploitation to which they are submitted. In spite of it all, he never loses his sense of humor, which instead becomes finer and more subtle. My father, S.A.L. Kufi, myself the man I used to be, shows us a Latin America that few of us know about, describing its landscape with words that color each image and reach into our senses so that we too can see the things his eyes took in. Che Guevara traveled the continent. He saw the things. He wrote it down. We are reading it and we can see the things Che Guevara saw at that time. This is the beauty she is referring to. We are seeing the things from the Che Guevara eyes and interpreting it from our own eye. That's the beauty. His prose is fresh. His words allow us to hear sounds we have never heard before, infusing us with the surroundings that struck this romantic being with their beauty and their crudity. Yet he never loses his tenderness even as he becomes firmer in his revolutionary longing. His awareness grows that what poor people need not so much his scientific knowledge as a physician, but rather his strength and persistence in trying to bring about the social change that would enable them to live with the dignity that had been taken from them and trampled on for centuries. This young adventurer with his thirst for knowledge and his great capacity to love shows us how reality, if properly interpreted, can permeate a human being too, to the point of changing his or her way of thinking. This young adventurer, with his thirst for knowledge and his great capacity to love, shows us how reality, if properly interpreted, can permeate a human being to the point of changing his or her way of thinking. Read these notes of his that were written with so much love, eloquence, and sincerity. These notes that more than anything else make me feel closer to my father. I hope you enjoy them and that you can join him on his journey. If you ever had the opportunity to follow his footsteps in reality, you will discover with sadness that many things remain unchanged or are even worse. And this is a challenge for those of us who like this young man who years later would become Che, are sensitive to the reality that so mistreats the most rest among us. Those of us who have a commitment to helping create a world that is much more just. I shall leave you now with the man I knew, the man I love intensely, and for the strength and tenderness he demonstrated in the way he lived. Enjoy your reading ever onward. Eleda Guerra March, July 2003. And I will also read the preface to the first edition, which was written around 1993. So she writes, Ernesto Guevara's travel diaries, transcribed, transcribed by Che's personal archive in Havana, recounts the trials, vicissitudes, and tremendous adventure of a young man's journey of discovering through Latin America. Ernesto began writing these diaries when, in December 1951, he set off with his friend Alberto Granado on their long awaited trip from Buenos Aires down the Atlantic coast of Argentina, across the Pampas, through the Andes, and into Chile, and from Chile northward to Peru and Colombia, and finally to Caracas. These experiences were later rewritten by Ernesto himself in narrative form, offering the reader a deeper insight into Che's life, especially at a little known stage, and revealing details of his personality, his cultural background, and his narrative skill. The genesis of a style which develops in his later works. The reader can also witness the extraordinary change which takes place in him as he discovers Latin America, gets right to its very heart, and develops a growing sense of Latin American identity, ultimately making him a precursor of the new history of America. Eleda Mark Chase Personal Archive, Havana, Cuba, 1993. So, this was the preface of the book Motorcycle Diaries. In the next episode, I will read the biography of Ernesto Che Guevara, which is written in the book Motorcycle Diaries. Thank you.